everyone. This is the sixth module in our CannaCareers series, which we are producing with the hope that we can help you guys get gainful employment in the cannabis industry. Today, we're going to be talking about employment specifically in hemp and how that's a little bit different from the other jobs that we've been talking about in cannabis prior. Lo has already given us a lovely introduction about our 501c3 nonprofit. I did also want to point out, because Lo sometimes doesn't toot her own horn when she should, that we are the first trailblazing female-led cannabis-oriented 501c3 in New York. So, congratulations to us and to you, Lo, for all your hard work. Now to introduce our speakers, we have with us Eric Range from Hemp and Fork. He also is from Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I always do that. And we have me, who is the co-founder of Sativa Remedy, which is a CBD retailer up in Hudson, right? Hudson, New York, I believe. Or is it the Hudson Valley?
Tonawanda, New York, Western New York, Buffalo, New York.
Okay. There you go, Buffalo, New York. My apologies, but they both took some time out of their days to join us and to help us go over a little bit more about getting into the hemp industry and what that feels and looks like and how we can do that. Do you guys want to tell us a little bit about yourselves? Eric, do you want to go first?
I am a Southern gentleman, and my mother would have my tail if I would not allow Nia to go first. So I must yield, to you first, please.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. And I'm sure your mom does too. Hi, everyone. My name is Nia. I'm so excited to be here. I am the co-founder and CEO of Sativa Remedy. We're based out of Western New York, 20 minutes outside of the city of Buffalo. So on the other side of the state, from New York City, but I co-founded Sativa Remedy back in 2018 after I had just graduated from the University of Buffalo with my background in chemistry and health and human service with a focus on mental health. And really how I got started was my very last internship was for a medical cannabis doctor, and the science of cannabis and the human application of cannabis really was intriguing to me. But then it hit home a little bit closer when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and we were just really, traditional medicine was not quite cutting it anymore, right? So for me, it was being able to dig deep into the science of CBD, THC, and now translate it to my granddad and being able to convince him to try this plant. And when I was able to do it, we saw a huge shift in his quality of life. All those benefits that we talk about with hemp and cannabis, right? And for him, it was quite the transition. It was CBD isolate first, then it was full spectrum hemp CBD products before even touching medical cannabis towards the end of his life. But I think I saw this gap in the industry where there wasn't enough education. There wasn't enough of raising the consumer awareness is what I would like to say. And in 2018, with the Farm Bill passing, it was a chance for us to take this business outside of our parents' garage and to just bootstrap this business. So we started doing 6-foot vendor shows. This was during a time where cannabis was still highly stigmatized, but with hemp, I was able to start having these conversations with any folk that were willing to listen and hear my spiel out. And then in 2019 was when we launched our brick and mortar. 2020 really took us for a roller coaster ride, to say nonetheless, but we were able to pivot successfully with e-commerce. And then in 2021 was this year, I started building my team in preparation for transitioning into cannabis. We can talk about what that a little bit looks like and kind of what I've been looking forward to in building a team and being really mindful as an employer of where we're headed and how impactful this industry can have, not just in cannabis. I really have this belief and passion that positive cannabis usage can have greater impact in our community, in rebuilding communities, and empowering and arming folks with what they need to build generational wealth, to be able to heal themselves and heal their loved ones. And I believe that it's just the start of this industry, and I'm excited to see more programming like this and to participate in this. So I'm super excited for the conversation we're going to have today, and happy to answer any questions in regards to like the New York State framework that is around hemp and cannabis right now.
Thank you so much, Nee. Just a quick note before I let Eric take center stage. If you are joining us, welcome. If you could please put yourself on mute, that would be super, super helpful so we can focus all of our attention on our speakers. So Eric, would you like to do the honors of introducing yourself?
I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have gone first. Now, I mean, that's a tough act to follow. But I love all the amazing work you guys are doing. My story, I won't bore you guys with all of the details, but since 2015 is when I first entered the cannabis industry with an ancillary business. And since that time, roughly about 2016, is when I got into advocacy. I became the board chair for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We are the largest minority nonprofit in the cannabis industry across the country, with 27 chapters throughout the U.S., one in Toronto, one in Jamaica, and one in London as well. And so I've been very fortunate to be at the table to help write legislation, to work with legislators at the state and local levels to be able to craft legislation so that minorities can participate. My nonprofit has done quite a bit in terms of educating and workshops and all of that to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure our communities are getting the information they need in order to get into this industry. But through all of that work, again, I've been fortunate to be a part of different boards. So I sit on the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board for the state of Florida, Department of Agriculture. So I helped to create the hemp program here in the state of Florida, where I'm a native. After doing that, I obviously I did so to make sure that minorities were able to get into the industry, but also so that I could as well. And so since 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, when my state opened up for cultivation licenses, is when my company was founded, right? Smack dab in the middle of the country shutting down. We were starting our company and working with a number of Black farmers here in the state of Florida to begin cultivating hemp. And late 2020, we released our first product, which is slightly different than what most people think about when they think about hemp and cannabis. Most people are aware of what we can roll up in a joint and smoke, or a tincture, or even a bath bomb and so on. But very little discussion is given to hemp as a food source. And so my company, we focus on hemp as a food source. Our company name is Legacy Farms Group, but our DBA is Hemp and Fork. So that's what, our brand, our forward-facing brand is Hemp and Fork. And we focus on the hemp seed as a superfood, which it is. It contains all of the essential amino acids that we need in our diet. It contains omega-3, omega-6, plant protein. It really and truly, I believe, is a part of the conversation when we're talking about food scarcity across the globe, when we're talking about climate change across the globe. Hemp is smack dab in the middle of that conversation. And that's why we chose to start what we have been, to the best of our knowledge, we're the first Black-owned hemp food manufacturer in the country. We have the first Black-owned hemp heart brand out there as well. And so we're looking to continue building as a company. We're located in, again, Florida, and positioning in the Southeast to be able to participate in not just the hemp conversation, but also the food conversation. Again, we believe that, as Nee said, this is a part of healing our communities, and we believe nutrition is a part of that conversation.
Thank you so much, Eric. Okay, so just from these two introductions, I think you guys can get an idea of how diverse the options for employment and business in general are within the hemp industry as a sub-industry of broader cannabis. So we're going to cover some of that later on. We're going to be also covering, aside from the different possible career opportunities, the differences in getting a job in hemp versus getting a job in cannabis at large. And we're also going to review tips and advice on applying for, interviewing for, and working in the hemp industry. So the first thing that we wanted to cover is just generally how hemp versus cannabis are different, or what we mean when we say hemp versus cannabis. The main difference is, well, THC will get you high, CBD will not. Hemp plants and cannabis plants are actually the same species. They're both cannabis. Legally, hemp is defined as a cannabis plant that contains 0.3% or less of THC. And CBD can actually be derived from plants grown for both hemp and for cannabis. There are two parts of the hemp plant that are used in hemp production or for manufacturing purposes, and that's both the flower and the fiber. The flower is the stuff that all of us already know. The flower is the stuff that we smoke, the stuff that we distill into, oils, tinctures, CBD bath bombs, whatever. The fiber, on the other hand, is what we use for industrial stuff. Now, industrial stuff means textiles. So like the clothes that we're wearing, the blankets, rugs, fabric of any kind. It can also be used for rope, for plastic, for a replacement for concrete called hempcrete. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe hempcrete is actually stronger than traditional concrete, isn't it? More durable? And hemp rope as well, too, right? Last I checked, they were looking into hemp rope for bridges.
Yep, and hempcrete, I believe, is also very fire resistant for communities that battle wildfires a lot. It is more stable almost, especially if we were to bring in the conversation of climate being a real issue. And as we move forward, we see these opportunities with hemp fiber. And I think that if we look like historically, the reason why the 2018 Farm Bill really passed was to use hemp as fiber. And a lot of smart individuals also took it as a way to make hemp also a medicinal product in terms of CBD tinctures and topicals, etc. But we oftentimes forget in the discussion that hemp is a really durable, powerful plant. World War II, farmers were actually subsidized to grow hemp because we needed those materials for the war that was going on in that time. But due to American politics rooted in racism, right when hemp started to compete with cotton and paper was then when we started seeing the United States reverse these policies and to actually criminalize both hemp and cannabis.
Absolutely. And if I can add to that, you mentioned there were two ways to use hemp. I would add the third. Again, my company focuses on the food source. And when we grow, although fiber is a byproduct of our crop, we grow specifically for the seed itself. And that seed is what we then make different foods out of. So I like to tell people it's three different lanes. It's the growing hemp for the cannabinoids. And again, CBD is the one that we hear most about, but there are over 100 cannabinoids found in the plant. And so different reasons to grow it for. So one lane is to grow it for the cannabinoids. Another lane is to grow it for the fiber. But the third lane would also be for growing for the actual food source itself, growing it as a grain. And when you think about this hemp plant, again, the reason why, my company, Hemp and Fork, our three pillars are healthy eating, healthy living, healthy environment. And that last one, that healthy environment, is because as we are growing this, we're not only cleaning the soil, but it is sequestering the carbon out of the air. When we talk about hempcrete makes your house carbon neutral. These are the things that I believe are going to be a part of our future. They have to be a part of the conversation of climate change, food scarcity, and this plant can do so much. But we are right now still very early on in this industry. It became legal in 2014 under the Obama administration for states to have pilot programs. And then in 2018, under the Trump administration, it became legal for states to create their actual program to commercialize it. And so now that we're getting into the early stages of commercialization of the plant, we will get into that on a much larger scale. And this will become more like a commodity, like your soy, your wheat, your corn, those type of things on a large scale. So the jobs in this space are only going to grow exponentially. But we have to be very open and honest about where a lot of those jobs will be, and it will be in the agricultural sectors. And so when you think about getting into this industry, you have to be very specific about, what it is you want to do. Some people want to return to a farm, like style of living, and so that may absolutely be something that is in your best interest to pursue. But if you're someone who enjoys a modern Western luxuries like AC and those type of things, you may want to look at the other sides, like the other parts of the processes, the manufacturing, the processing, the retailing, the ancillary businesses, because those are going to be more in line with probably the skill sets you bring from other industries as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that. You mentioned the other types of cannabinoids that we can derive from hemp. I know, Nee, that you have, your chemistry background, being a scientist and stuff. Do you want to walk us through some of the other cannabinoids we might want to know about if we're looking to enter the hemp industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Sam had said earlier, by legal definition, hemp is defined as anything that contains less than 0.3% or less delta 9 THC. So there's a very special caveat, and when legislation is wrote to be very specific, because with the emergence of and the growth of the hemp industry, especially on the hemp cannabinoid side, we are seeing more folks cultivate for not just CBD. There are other cannabinoids, 100 plus other cannabinoids that exist in the plant. So now there are folks who are cultivating for high CBG percentage, cannabigerol, which is known as the mother cannabinoid, but also there is now the emergence of new psychoactive cannabinoids. So those are the cannabinoids that are intoxicating. And with that, there is delta 8 THC, delta 10 THC, THCO, THCP. And I know this can sound very like intense to be aware of 100 plus cannabinoids that are in this industry. But really the main takeaway from this is that hemp and cannabis are more than just CBD and THC. We are working with other cannabinoids. We are working with flavonoids. We are working with omega-3s and 6s, and being aware of the different compounds that make up this plant will be vital to your start in this industry too. I think just having the basic fundamental knowledge and being aware that these other cannabinoids exist and that they are emerging. I believe I have some links, and really Google is my personal best friend, because I think as an entrepreneur in this space, as anyone in this space, we are constantly always learning. It is a continuing learning opportunity for all of us. And Leafly, Google are my best friends when I don't know something, when I'm presented with something. My team member all the time gets calls, do you have delta 8 THC? And in training, we're really, being responsible vendors and being able to teach her, how do we retail now an intoxicating product when 6 months ago we were retailing mostly non-psychoactive, high CBD, low THC product. It's a different conversation we have to have with our clientele base when we're selling something that's non-psychoactive versus something that is psychoactive and intoxicating, and being able to be aware of that and having those necessary conversations really to elevate the consumer awareness. Us in the industry, we're always tapped into what's going on, but we need to take that outside of this hemp and cannabis community to the consumers, to the moms, the dads, the aunts, who are now going to be more than ever interested in more natural healing methods. So that's my little spiel. Be aware that there's more than CBD and THC in the hemp and cannabis plants.
And if I can add to that, I think one of the most beautiful things about what you just said is that I always tell people you want to negotiate from a position of strength, right? Even when you're going for an employment, it is a negotiation. And the more knowledge you have walking into that door, the better you're going to be able to negotiate your own terms of that position, the salary for that position, because you're going to be able to walk into the door with value that you can add to their team. Like she just said, a shop owner, a apothecary shop owner is now selling CBD, and it was once, non-psychoactive, and now all of a sudden Delta 8 explodes onto the industry, and now her supplier is pushing Delta 8. And now, like you said, you have to have that conversation. And so she needs employees that can have that conversation with, her clients as well. So if you're able to come in and be able to provide that and show to that shop owner that, hey, I have a, very, detailed understanding and knowledge of the trends in this industry, some of the science behind this plant and how it works and why it works. That will help that shop owner see the value in what you bring to the table.
We've actually talked a little bit about that in prior modules as well, because I think that carries through to all jobs that you're applying for. Know the job that you're applying to, know the industry that you're applying to be a part of. Particularly within the cannabis industry as a whole, because there is such a focus on how it can be used medicinally or how it can interact with pre-existing medical conditions. It's really important for everybody, all the way up at the top to all the way down to, the person that's planting the seed in the ground. It's important for everybody to sort of understand what you're producing and why and what it can do. And if you're, let's say, in retail, like Eric was talking about, then you are the customer's first line of interaction with this plant. So, for example, if you have somebody that's coming to you that needs help in some way and is looking for that from the cannabis plant, imagine how much more you'll be able to help this person if you come prepared, fully understanding what that plant can do. We mentioned prior the 2018 Farm Bill, but I'm going to want to get back to that a little bit. But first, I wanted to go back over really quickly, because I missed this slide, the different uses of the hemp plant, and there are many. Like Eric mentioned, food is a really, really big one. Hemp seeds are really high in omega-3s. So, I personally put them in things. I blend them into smoothies and stuff, and I bake with them because they give a good little crunch. But they can also be used for all the other things that we were discussing, including smoking, which is obviously my favorite form of use for the plant. But although we haven't completely begun exploring the many myriad industrial uses of the hemp plant, that's definitely a direction that the industry is going. It's something that I think we've recycled from our very, very far past, because I know that some of our ancestors, specifically the ones that were like indigenously using cannabis, had already been using it for textiles and for rope and other uses. But that being said, this direction that we're going in, being in the hemp industry prior to it sort of exploding, is a really good place for us as marginalized folks to position ourselves. It allows us to get our foot in the door early on and stake our claim instead of having to fight for a seat at the table that someone else is trying to build.
Yeah, one of the things I love about this industry is that it is very new to the U.S. And I have to be very specific about that. To the U.S. In modern day. It's not new to the U.S. historically, because as we've mentioned already, we used to pay farmers to do this. You go and you look at Kentucky. Kentucky at one point in time was like the hemp capital of the world. So there's a lot of history surrounding this plant here on the U.S. But what has happened is, in 1937, when we outlawed marijuana and hemp was lumped into that, we also began to dismantle the infrastructure for processing and creating products from the hemp plant. And so over time, that technology that once existed here for us to be able to take that crop from the field and make it into all of these different products has dwindled away here in the United States. There is something like 25,000 known products that can be made from the hemp plant prior to modern day technology. And so I love that we have both the opportunity to look at, okay, what has already been done with these plants? That's one of the first things we did as a company is look at, well, what is an easy pathway? My hemp parts are one step closer from nature. All we really do is crack open the shell, and the inner core of it is the food source. Like it doesn't get too much technical than that, right? But it's also the ability, as we look at, as a company, we see this movement and trend towards more plant-based eating and more, different food technology. We're looking at down the road, how do we apply what's happening in modern day times in regards to food advances and apply that to this hemp plant and kind of merge the two. And so you have both this opportunity to look back at what has already been done, but then also dream of what has never been thought of. And so that's one of the, I think, the most beautiful things. So if you're one of those people who are like, you know what, I like something that is known, is predictable, then, you know, find a company that's working with a product that has already been tried and true. But if you're someone who's like, you know, I like innovation, I like creativity, I like, you know, trying to advance things, then find a company that's in the, you know, technology space or in the space where they're looking to, you know, kind of challenge the status quo using this plant. That's how we got to Delta 8. You know, before then, we didn't even know that you can synthesize a compound in the plant and create something that was psychoactive. That is a company that said, you know, we're going to push the envelope a little bit and see what can be done with this. And so through that, it creates different opportunities.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. So sorry, guys. I had some technical difficulties and needed to log out and log back in, but I'm pulling up our presentation once more and we can get right back into it.
Are there any questions so far? Are there any terms that was thrown out that you're like, what are they talking about? I know I personally have a term, but before I pose my question, I just want to open it to anyone. Do you guys have any questions? Not yet. Okay. So Eric, you said something very interesting that, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm getting it right, that we're still discovering, you know, new parts of the plant, right? So, and I think Nee kind of touched on this, is that when they're building legislation, it's very, or it seems to be tied to the discoveries that we have. How does that change how we approach entering the industry? Do we have to be as up to date with you all to know that, okay, there was Delta 8 and then there's Delta 10? Or is it more so just being aware of what the industry standard is? If we're still discovering new things, if there's new compounds being found, how do we position ourselves as far as knowledge? Because I would say I'm like moderately, you know, aware of some of the terms that you all are saying, and definitely more comfortable with the concept of Delta 8 than the new Delta 10, right? More comfortable with CBD than I am with CBG. So yeah, my question is, what is the scale for our learning? Should we pressure ourselves to know the current industry standards? And yeah, that should we pressure ourselves? Because it seems like it's something that's still budding and it's happening pretty, like, not every day, but we've definitely in the 2 weeks, I've noticed in the last 2 weeks that I've seen an uptick in conversations even mentioning CBG and how it can be used, you know, in addition to THC for people who have anxiety. But I'm like, okay, so now I have to remember this as well. So where do we draw the line? Or is it a personal thing? If you like education, then sure. But what do we need to actually be a part of the industry? What does our knowledge set have to be?
Great. You know, great question. It can be overwhelming for sure. There's so much information out there. There's so many different sources. It can be very difficult to discern between what sources are good sources and those that are not. And so, yeah, I don't want to send anybody down a rabbit hole of just overconsumption of information. What I would recommend is kind of first, you know, one of the things I wrote in my ebook, the second chapter, the first chapter was like understanding the laws, right? Understand the framework. I think that's important for everybody to understand. You know, most people, when we talk about the cannabis plant, we talk about medical marijuana or adult use, right? And those two are illegal at the federal level still. But hemp is legal at the federal level. And you need to understand that nuance even before you get into the industry. So understanding the laws. And the reason why I say that's important to know is because whereas on the medical marijuana side and the adult use side, you have in large part, you know, laissez-faire. Y'all remember laissez-faire from middle school, you know, this kind of hands-off approach to government, right? So the federal government has a hands-off approach to medical marijuana and adult use programs. But when it comes to something that is legal at the federal level, that hands-off approach kind of goes away. You know what I mean? Now you need to understand what the U.S. Department of Agriculture says about this. What does the Federal Drug Administration says about this? What does the the DEA says about this? Now you have different federal agencies that have a say in this entire program. So what I always tell people is first and foremost, kind of understand the broad framework that contains the program, the part of the industry you want to be in, whether it be medical, whether it be adult use or hemp. Understand the framework both at the federal, state, and local level. That's the first thing. Second thing, understand what your vision is. What it is that you want to do in this space. You know, a lot of people want to be CEOs, but if your skill set doesn't match being a CEO, perhaps that's not the route for you. You can be a founder and be a partner with someone, or you can go and be an employee and contribute to something that is growing. So understand what your vision is and how you feel you can add value in this space. And then once you do that, then begin looking at what type of companies align with that. So if you say, you know what, I'm good at, sales. Well, look at companies that are, retail. Maybe they have e-commerce, or maybe they're wholesale, and they can be startups, and you may be able to go in and provide some type of, provide that skill set of sales to what they're doing. And then I would say research that company and understand everything about what they're doing. So if they're dealing with Delta 8, understand Delta 8. If they're not dealing with Delta 8, then maybe that's not something for you to consider because that company isn't focused on it. So that way you're not, again, over consuming too much information. You can kind of tailor it based on the types of companies you're looking to apply for. I hope that helps. I know I said a whole lot just then, but I hope that made sense to somebody.
It was perfect. You completely understood my question because I felt like I was rambling, but you completely explained it. And thank you so much for walking us through that process and the way to kind of think about how we're going to position ourselves for employment. So thank you so much.
And in reference to that, I wanted to point out that we do have a worksheet available for today. We also have other worksheets up on our woke.world/CannaCareers website. These worksheets are designed to sort of help you walk through all of those questions that Eric was suggesting you ask yourself, help direct you towards, let's say, where your transferable skills might lead you in terms of what sector of the industry you want to decide to pursue. We also have a section for researching the company and a checklist that allows you to sort of proactively think about what questions you want to bring to the interview and stuff like that. We'll go over more of that later. Eric and me were also talking about the 2018 Farm Bill. I wanted to just quickly note that Farm Bill, there's a provision in that Farm Bill that made hemp no longer a federally illegal substance. It basically means that if prospective job seekers are trying to get into cannabis without as much legal risk, let's say, for example, a risk of not being able to get a loan or other benefits, supportive benefits that come from the system that way, then hemp is probably a better route at this time. I also wanted to note and clarify the conversation about hemp being legal in all 50 states. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here, and it looks like Idaho might be the last stronghold to approve, right? So when we say all 50 states at the federal level, I guess we're waiting on Idaho for that accolade.
Well, there's a nuance there. So it is legal in all 50 states at the federal level, but what has to happen is each state has to create its own program and have that program approved by the USDA. And so most states have gone through that process. Some states, and there was a provision that allowed states who had already had a pilot program under the 2014 Farm Bill to remain under that pilot program until, I believe, December of this year, in which they have to come into compliance with the 2018 Farm Bill. So it is, but even in states like Idaho, where they have not created a provision or a program for that, for individuals in that state to obtain licenses and permits to grow and so on, the provision in the Farm Bill still allows for individuals in that state to get a license directly through the USDA. So you can still, in that state, participate in the hemp industry. You just have a different process of getting your license and permit.
I see. So that means that there can be hemp job opportunities in those states.
Absolutely.
Well, that is very good to know. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and if I could add to that clarification, is that a lot of states are now separating hemp agriculture from hemp cannabinoid products as well. So my experience is specifically in New York State. So New York State has started by regulating and releasing hemp regulations for hemp retail manufacturers. So and also the potential ban of Delta 8 THC. But right now in our state, we are rolling the ball on adult use cannabis regulation and licensing. So the Office of Cannabis Management in New York State will have regulatory control over both hemp cannabinoid and adult use cannabis, but they will not have over the agricultural side of hemp and cannabis. Big takeaway with this is know your state's legislation and regulation, and then become an advocate for it. If you're in Idaho and there is no hemp farmers, there's no hemp retail yet, how can you advocate for that to kickstart in your state or in your community? And I'll just throw it in the chat really quick in regards to New York State hemp and cannabis regulations, and some websites with where you can read that information on.
Awesome, thank you so much, Nate. And I know that Eric, M for MM has a lot of information that you guys put out for the community across the country and in other places. So if you want to share any of those resources, guys, you guys can check out M4MM on Instagram or on their website and take a look at what they've got to offer, because there's a lot of information out there, and that's a good place.
Yeah. And will you guys be sharing like email or anything at the end of this? If so, I was going to say, if anybody emails me, and I can drop my email in the chat if need be. If you email me, I actually created a resource. It's just an Excel spreadsheet that links you to all of the Department of Agriculture's for all 50 states to their hemp page. So to kind of cut through some of the, the red tape, if you will, get you right to your state's Department of Ag. And to their hemp page, so you can understand what's happening in your state.
Oh, that is super awesome, Eric. Thank you so much. I will check back with you later for the link to that document, and I will share that on the page for this module on our website.
Perfect.
Okay. So next, I wanted to start talking about actually getting the job in hemp, what that means, and what we're looking for. And by we, I mean people who are applying for jobs, like what you want to Google. Let's say, for example, to try and find the right job for you. When compared to cannabis, most of the job descriptions and qualifications are similar. So you're still going to have like cultivation, manufacturing, different kinds of production. You're still going to have retail. You're still going to have transportation and all these other things. You're still going to have your ancillary businesses. The age requirements tend to be 18 plus instead of 21 plus. I know that that's been a question that I've been asked before. There also tend to be more hemp jobs available than there are THC specific jobs, but a lot of the jobs are in, as Eric was saying, agriculture. So the biggest differences here are going to be in the working environment. And as we have been discussing at length over the past couple slides, the regulation. So it's going to be really, really important for you as the person who is interested in applying to a specific job in this specific industry and within those different kinds of sectors to do your research. Not only know your regulations that are relevant to your specific state, but also what are people in this job, job market putting on their resume? What are people talking about here in this industry? What is useful for me to know? What do I need to show my potential employer that I know to show that I'm the best person for this job? So sorry, guys. Is there anything else you guys want to add about any advice you guys want to add about those of us getting started looking for jobs in hemp?
Yeah, I would add to this, going to conferences is a great way to find hundreds of companies at once. It's not like your typical like job fair per se, but I always tell people when you go to these conferences, in particular, and you can save money on not going to the actual like speaking parts of the conference and just getting a expo hall pass, and then go in there with the mindset that this is a employment fair. Like I'm going to go around to every employer. I'm going to pay attention to, what products they have, the kind of brand and see if it aligns. And I would make that my, way of getting connected because again, these companies are, they spend a lot of money to get to these conferences and so on. And so if you are taking the time to come out to these places, then you're showing that motivation, like the individual who showed up 20 minutes early, those things get noticed. And I think that is a great way to get connected. And so I would say before getting there, just like in any other job fair, pull together your elevator pitch, have some understanding of what it is you really want to do and what skill sets and values you can bring to the table. But I would use that as an opportunity. The other thing, a simple Google search of hemp jobs in your state, and then go to Indeed. Indeed is a great place. A lot of people have posted jobs on there, and I'll tell you, the number one resource for the cannabis industry in terms of like a social platform is LinkedIn. So if you had a business or if you were looking to seek employment, LinkedIn is one of the best places you can be. You can join different groups. You can create a strategy of messaging people and connecting with them. I wouldn't lead out, just say, hey, you got any jobs? That wouldn't be the way to go about it. But there is a strategy that you can, deploy to be able to get their attention, like, liking a few of their posts, commenting on their posts, and, easing your way into that. And then, you start to pay attention to what they are working on and seeing how you can add value specifically to what they have shown interest in. And so I would say be very strategic about it, because there are, the traditional way of just going in and trying to find a job, here's my resume, can you hire me? But then there's a more, strategic way of going about it as well.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Eric, because my very first cannabis conference was what inspired me. I went to it and it was 8 hours. It was long. I don't know why I decided to walk around in heels, but it was so inspiring to be in a room of folks that wanted to be in the same industry as you. And it really what lit my fire for wanting to enter the cannabis industry. So definitely look into those in your area or in other states that you can attend. I'm sure there is a hemp conference in almost every other state right now. So it often might be easier to also find a hemp conference where folks are talking about the hemp plant versus maybe attending a big cannabis conference like MJ BizCon in Vegas. Like definitely even the smaller conferences can add value. But another thing I wanted to mention is doing your due diligence is so vital when looking for an employer. I always tell my clientele that not all cannabis will fit for each person. Every person has a different method of consumption that works best for what they're trying to heal. I take that same analogy into work placement. You might being able to define what your goals are going to be for employment will help you find an employer or ask the right questions so that you can find the right fit for you. That just because a place is looking for a job and you want to work in the industry, that it might not always be the right fit. So when to say no or pass on an opportunity or let a door close so another door can open is vital. And that comes back to your awareness of what you see as your goal and your vision for yourself. And my biggest thing when trying to simply get a job or get started in business is to bet on yourself. Because if no one is going to bet on you, you have to bet on yourself. You have to walk into these conferences knowing that, like, even if it's a simple goal of talking to 10 employers today and asking if they have positions, or how my team member actually got hired was she had visited our hemp dispensary about at least once a month, and every month she'd come in, she would buy a product, but then she would ask me some questions about hemp and cannabis, and then she would be like, hey, if you're ever looking for a job, I would absolutely love to have the opportunity to talk to you. And she came in for, I think, a good 2-3 months. And I was like, we're not looking at the time. We're still growing, not looking. And when the time was right for myself as employer, my immediate first thought was that one customer that had been, following us, coming into the store, making those connections, consistency. Like if you're really, like you really want to work for this company, reach out, follow up, do your due diligence, find out what the company is all about, who their owners are, who sits on their board of directors, what is their mission statement, what is their vision, and are they looking to transition into cannabis? Is this a growing, or are they looking to transition into other fields? How do they want to grow their business? And then you can find out if that business is going to be the right fit for you starting out.
Yeah, I would say, just to add one last thing, there's no other industry in which alignment with the role that you're going to be in is more important. I think this industry is very communal. And so you want to make sure you're a part of the right community. And this is, I always say that the cannabis industry gives us an opportunity that we never had in many other industries. And that's really and truly to pick the type of community we want to be a part of, because so many companies are so new, to where, you can very quickly kind of see what the community looks like, and kind of get a feel for it, and determine again whether or not that aligns with the type of workspace you want to be in. The last thing I would tell anybody to do is to come into this industry and go into a job that is stressing you out. This is the industry in which you should be the most relaxed in your role. So definitely find a company that aligns with who you are.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for that advice. You guys actually covered a couple topics that I was planning on asking you guys in other slides, so I might ask you guys to reintroduce those topics in a few slides. I wanted to talk a little bit now about what it's like to actually work in hemp. I know you guys, are employers and you have teams that you hire. What is their day-to-day like? And what is your experience in your day-to-day too? What can I expect as somebody that wants to go into working in hemp?
Yeah, so for us, so we're a retail operation. So we have a front end and a back end, and I have two team members, both with very specific responsibilities. One is solely dedicated to learning the front end, the retail of hemp and cannabis, the regulations that fall around those, like we were speaking on earlier. And then we have a back end specialist who is responsible for all of our e-commerce. So that is back end inventory, making sure we are shipping out packages on time, that we're updating the website with new products. So both of those individuals have different responsibilities in the day-to-day operations, but why they were both hired and brought onto the team was really because of their willingness to learn about this industry. Neither had any experience. I wrote this down in my notes that I think it's there's a lot of certification programs out there for hemp and cannabis now, and if you are starting at ground zero, it might be a worthy investment to get your foundational knowledge. But Google can be just as good. For me as a retailer, I do not specifically look for certification or experience in hemp or cannabis. I'm more so looking for folks who are willing to learn. I loved it the other day. We were having a brainstorm about a billboard. This is advertising, right? But both of my team members felt the need to contribute to the conversation, and they came up with these ideas, and we were having now not just just me and my co-founder conversation, we were having a team conversation that brings on ideas, that brings on, really valuable conversations. And I think it's really important that when I'm looking to grow my team, I'm looking for people who are self-motivated, who are coming in with the willingness to learn. I actually, and this might be just me, I kind of feel some type of way when someone comes in and they might feel like they know everything without the willingness to learn. Because in my notes here, there is transferable skill, but then there's trainable knowledge. And I more value what are the transferable skills. So those skills look like customer service skills for our front end team member. But inventory management and computer skills are more necessary for my back end specialists, who will be working on a computer all the time, whereas my front end will have to be responsible for knowing the POS system. But I think both of their talent sets cross, because my back end specialist one day said to me, hey, I would really love, down the line, the opportunity to train and be a part of your front end as well. I love cannabis and I love hearing you guys have these conversations. I want to know more. And I love that lit up my brain centers as an employer, because this is what I look for. And I was so touched that he wanted to learn more about the plant. And I check in with my team members a lot. I'm like, okay, what are you doing? How are you doing? And what more can I teach you? Because as an employer, it is my responsibility to invest in my team and to make sure that they are being able to increase their knowledge base for whether it's here at this job or their next venture that they're going into is that I can add value to their work experience. And I think that was something like really important, that, you know, that they're always keeping open communications with me, that we're always checking in with them and seeing how they're doing, seeing where they want to improve or what they need to improve on, and how we as an employer can help them best do that.
Yeah, for us, you know, day to day, I think COVID kind of heightened this. Of course, we started during COVID, so we do a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom calls. So get used to that part, you know. But that also means that you should know that most of a good portion of the opportunities in the space are virtual. You know, of course, if you're working with someone like me who has a, you know, brick and mortar retail location, you know, then there may be, you know, that in-person, you know, type of role or job. But I think the overwhelming number of jobs in this space are virtual. And you can work for a company that's founded in or based in Colorado if you have the skill set that matches what they're looking for. And so for me as a business owner, one of the things that I've been focusing more on, you know, when I was starting up, it was like whoever wanted to get on, whatever friends wanted to, you know, add value and so on. And, you know, whatever we could do to get this plane off the ground. But, you know, as we look to, you know, become more efficient, as we look to, you know, stand up our operation and grow, we have to keep in mind, you know, I'm reading a book called, or I read a book earlier this year called Traction, and it talked about right people, right seats, right? And one, does a person have the knowledge base and skill set to be in the role? And two, do they have the capacity, meaning do they have the time, you know, to add, to dedicate to it? And then the last one, to me, I think is the most important. Do they want to be in the role? We overlook that so often. You know, we all have been in jobs that, you know, we had the skill set for, we had the time to give to it, but we didn't want to be in it. And we know that we didn't give 110% to that role. So that last part, I think, is super, super key for me, is that it's somebody who wants to be in that role. And so for you as a job seeker, that's why I put so much emphasis on stressing that it's not just about, you know, the company interviewing you, but you interviewing that company and making sure that it's a good fit for you and that it's a role that's for you as well. Because, you know, if not, I think you will find yourself, you'll find where you can get a job and, you know, it'll pay and so on. But you'll still find, you know, the same glass ceilings in place that, you know, you may have found in other industries, or lack of opportunity for growth and so on. Whereas when you find that company that you really like and align with, I mean, I got a young dude straight out of college hired with a company to work as a, you know, a staff member cleaning up the labs, and he quickly became the senior lab tech in that company, because he wanted that job. Like he was hungry for it, and so he showed up and cleaning the lab differently than, you know, somebody who was just like, I just need a job to pay, you know, get my bills paid. And I try to help people remember that employers hire people to solve a problem for them, not because you got kids with mouths to feed. I get that part, but at the end of the day, you know, a business owner has a problem that he needs to solve, or a role that he needs to fill, and that's what you're coming to them for.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm sorry, guys. I am sadly frozen again. Can you see the next slide?
What is it like to work in hemp is what I see.
Okay, so I'm frozen. Give me just one moment, folks. I'm going to try and get us back on.
And I just want to add to that too, that your first job, whether it be in hemp or cannabis, is not going to be your last. I think there's always opportunity to progress and grow towards what your goals and your vision for your career is going to be like. I think oftentimes people get a job, and yes, as an employer, I want you to stay with my team for a really long time, right? But when I hired, and I said this directly to my employees, if better opportunities are there for you and they align with you better, I will be the employer that fully supports you and supports your move, because I, as an employer, remember that I work for my employees.
Yeah, and you know, it's also important to note that, you know, I know for a lot of companies and most are startups in this space. Like, I mean, there are very few who are well established. And so that means for you as an employee, you need to understand that you're likely going to be walking into a mess. Like, it's just the reality of where companies are. People are still trying to, build the internal infrastructure, still trying to, hire on and bring the right team, still trying to get the wheels turning so the revenues can pay people. And so you can sometimes get yourself into a really good position by having a willingness to kind of crawl before you walk, if you will. I'm not saying work for free at all. That is not what I'm saying. I hope that's not what anyone's taking. But maybe taking a lesser role and working up to a larger role. Maybe adding value even before the opportunity for a job is given. One of my mentors talks about how he's been able to advance in life many times is because he's been able to identify a problem that someone had, and he'd go and solve that problem for them without ever asking for any money in return or anything. But he knows that when he does eventually need something, he has someone he can go to down the road. And so again, I'm all about, I play, I like to play chess with it. You know what I mean? We have to be very, very strategic about how we approach this. And I think you can find, I've seen people go into a company, and become a founder because of what they were, willing and able to add to that company very early on. Whereas initially it was just a job opportunity, and now you can come out getting some equity and ownership. And again, I think that's because that person approached it just very differently.
Thank you for sharing that, guys. Those are really, really helpful tips and things to think about as we go into the next section. I want to talk a little bit more about actually applying for the job. So I know that we discussed transferable skills previously. The thing I want to say about transferable skills is that if you are coming from an industry that's not the cannabis or hemp industries, if you're coming from like, the food industry, maybe you're coming from like the retail industry, maybe you're coming from the restaurant industry, maybe you're coming from, I don't know, marketing background, HR, what have you, your transferable skills are the things that will be helpful across any industry. They are the stuff that you know how to do that can come from anywhere in your past experience that will help you wherever else you go. So like Nee had mentioned prior, customer service. If you work in retail or if you work in food service as like a server or a barista, then you have customer-facing customer service skills. You've built those skills over time, and that's useful here too. That's a transferable skill. If you are a scientist that has been in research and development for food products, then that is a transferable skill that you can bring with you to R&D here in cannabis, to production here in cannabis or in hemp. And the same is true for a lot of other places and a lot of other things. So when you're thinking about what your transferable skills are, you need to be creative. You need to think about all of the things that you have done professionally in the past, the things that you like doing, the things that maybe you're not so good at that you might want to leave out. And that might help you give some direction to your employment search in hemp and in cannabis. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add about transferable skills? I think we covered a lot of that during the past hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say this, that all businesses, very few businesses operate outside of this model. There are, kind of three main areas of operation in any business. And one is like the production. So making whatever it is you're selling, whatever product, whether that be, a physical product or a digital product or something, creating that product is one lane. The other lane is like your marketing, your sales, your branding, your advertising, all of those different things that you're doing to get noticed and to find new customers and so on. And then the other lane is your finance. Like, how are you financing the business? How are you taking in cash and capital? How are you, getting investors, all of that, anything that's fine. How are you paying your staff? All of those things are kind of in those areas. And so if you think about those three pillars, then think about the skill sets that you have and think about it in whatever role you've played in jobs that you've had in the past. What role, where did your role fall under those three pillars? And then look for jobs in those areas. And I think, again, you'll find jobs available through, searches. And a lot of them, again, will be looking for lab techs that don't have any cannabis background, but you've had laboratory science background, or you have, you went to school for something that's chemistry related. There are very few jobs in the cannabis industry that are not going to have to train you, when you come on. So some of the knowledge you certainly, again, you want to walk in with some of it there so you can negotiate from a position of strength, but almost all companies are going to have to train you on what they want you to know, their process of doing things, and so on. So, just looking at those three areas, you can kind of see where your skills may fit into those.
Yeah, and
so sorry.
Yeah, so specifically for retail, what I'm looking for, I think number one out the gate is really customer service experience. I'm looking at a team member's resume right now, and she has, 3 places that she was a server for. So that tells me that she's really personable. And she showed up to her interview like that. She's very personable. She's able to communicate. And then I can train her on the hemp and cannabis side. I can train her on what the difference between CBD and Delta-8 THC is. But if you're not someone who is maybe social or cares for human interactions, then maybe looking for a back-end specialist. You can still work in retail. Like it doesn't mean that you can't work in retail, but you might be looking for an inventory specialist position or working on the manufacturing side. If you love houseplants, like one of my team members loves houseplants and wants to get into cultivation, but understands that there really aren't maybe a lot of positions in the area right now. So she's starting in retail, but through us, she's able to learn more about hemp and cannabis cultivation through the products that she's working with and how we're training her on those products too. So yeah, that's something just from the retail side I thought I'd bring up.
Yeah, sales and business development is key on my side because we do much more like wholesale to different retail customers and distributors. So folks who have that ability, again, you have to be very personable and are willing to be creative and finding new, opportunities for us. We always like to do different partnerships and so on. So being able to kind of think outside of the box and find, opportunities for us are going to be skill sets. So, I think sometimes it's good when you don't come from this industry, but you're able to kind of apply outside knowledge to this industry. It becomes a really powerful thing for us because then, in a team meeting, when we're saying, okay, well, what type of partnerships do we want to, create or go after? Someone could come with this out of box, hey, what if we partner with this company that's, doing, stiletto shoes? And I'm like, why would we partner with them? But then the case can be made. You see what I'm saying? Like, again, I don't know food and shoes, but, anyway, the point is that you're able to think outside of the box. You're creative. You're bringing, new ways of approaching, I think, age-old problems. But you're just applying new ways of thinking and approaching them.
Yeah, so I think that the general idea here is be creative. Your experience and skill set from wherever they may have come can be useful here. You just need to think about the way that you can apply this, the hemp industry specifically. Okay. We're just going to go over real quick the resume, cover letter, and the negotiating and interviewing parts of this. They're usually the same across the board. Resume tips, keep it objective. Also, short and sweet. Lots and lots of HR folks get lots and lots and lots of resumes. Nobody has time to read your 4-page resume. Try and keep it to a page or 2. List only your relevant experience. So this is your opportunity to really think about, what have I done in each of these past jobs? What of these, activities or tasks have created skills that are now relevant to the job that I'm applying for? Your resume should be tailored to each job that you apply for, as with your cover letter. List all of your relevant memberships and certifications. Like me was saying before, certifications in the hemp and cannabis industry are relatively new. So most of us are probably not going to have a ton of them, but if you have any, this is a good chance to put them on your resume. It's always really helpful for people who are looking at your resume to know that you are interested enough in the industry to, join organizations like MM4M or Woke. Use keywords to describe your skills on your resume. Do this for your cover letter too. We have gone over what keywords are in the past in our past modules. We've also gone over a list of possible keywords that are specific to different sectors, such as manufacturing and retail and compliance, etc. So if you guys want to check out our webpage again, that's woke.world/CannaCareers. You can check out our library of downloadable PDFs with those keywords. How to use keywords on your resume. Guys, pepper them in there. I mean, the keywords that we're often looking for will be related to the job specifically to which you're applying. When you look at these keywords, and you can do some of your own research as well, our worksheets are designed to be a starting point, not the end all be all. We want you guys to do a lot of your own research. Those keywords can be used when you're just in the spaces where you're describing your relevant skill sets and experiences. They're also really useful for your cover letters. The reason we tell you to put your keywords in your resume and cover letters is because some of the companies that you're applying for will be using search engines and other, technology to sift through the initial influx of resumes that they receive. Having keywords there helps put you at the top of that list, helps your resume, ding for a match. So yeah, don't just pepper them in there randomly though, like actually think about where you're putting them and why and if they're relevant. Next order of business, the cover letter. There's some debate among HR professionals, including HR professionals that we've had here during our modules, about whether or not a cover letter is necessary. I personally always do a cover letter because in my opinion, it's better safe than sorry. If the employer that I'm applying to doesn't care about cover letters, they can just skip it and no harm, no foul. But if they do, then I haven't shot myself in the foot preemptively. Like your resume, your cover letter should be tailored to the job to which you're applying. It should be tailored to the company that you're applying to as well. So this is the place where you want to start doing your research. This is also a space for you to explain any gaps in employment that you might have. If you have already started your expungement process, if that's something that's relevant for you, this is a place where you can also give a little bit more information about that. If you feel comfortable, it's also a place and a space for you to show off your personality and to give more details about what your skill sets are and what your experience enables you to do separately from the resume, which is sort of just like, I did this and accomplished this at this job. The cover letter is a space for like, accomplishing this at this job allows me to do this elsewhere for you. Okay, so now we're talking about interviewing and negotiating. You guys are the employers, so I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions here. Our general rule of thumb would be to research the employer, ask questions, plan ahead, and practice. If you're like me and comfortable practicing by yourself, you can practice in a mirror. If you like feedback, find a friend that you trust and practice. Bring your questions and bring your resume with you as well. So now that I've gone over our general CannaCareers tips, I wanted to hear from you guys, me and Eric, as the employers. What do you guys like to see on a resume and a cover letter? And what do you guys like to hear from potential employees when you're interviewing?
I think, and I might have jumped on this earlier, just about having customer service experience, especially that was vital for when we were looking for a front end team member. But also something that I thought really hit me is I have prior experience in the medical industry. And that was simply as a pharmacy technician and as a medical assistant and as a medical scribe. And those were through my internships in college. So don't, undervalue those minor internships that you might have had. And as I'm looking at my team member's resume right now, she really, she didn't have a cover letter, but what her objective was to find a company that offers opportunities to grow from within. And I thought that was really like cool that she wrote that, because it meant that she wanted a company that she can grow with, not simply just have employment with. But she also had prior medical experience. But what stood out to me and kind of what was like that locked her in was that she had server experience. I have a lot of respect for those in the food industry. I was a former nail technician in a past life, and I know that folks who work in those spaces, they can have service with a smile and be able to, you know, address the toughest of clientele. And they're really versatile, they're fast, they have agility, they're on point. And that to me, like when I thought of a server, I just thought of this list. So, you know, it might be to someone else like a server position, like that's not really, you know, a star-studded position to have, but you don't know that your retailer is actually like, as a retailer, that's what I'm looking for, are those folks with those skill sets, those transferable skill sets.
Awesome. Thank you, Nee. What about you, Eric? What is it that sparks your interest when you're interviewing or reading a cover letter or a resume?
You know, for me, it actually goes before then. It is usually the people that I've hired, the resume was a formality for me. It was an afterthought. I had already in my mind kind of made up that I was going to hire them. And it was because they were folks who kind of, you know, again, I'm not I'm pretty, you know, all over the place. Like my face is pretty, you know, out there in this space. And so a lot of people follow me, a lot of people reach out, but it's the way that they reached out that really stuck out to me. It was the persistence. It was the fact that they had been paying attention to what I was doing. So like when when they reached out, they were like, hey, can we get on a call? And can we, talk? I just want to, learn a little bit more from you about the industry. It wasn't even just that they were there to learn. They also had already deciphered how they could help me. And, they made it clear on that call, like, hey, I see you're doing such and such, I've done this for my company before, and I've done this and I've done that. And it was like, oh, really? Okay, tell me more about that. And it was like a conversation turned into an interview before we had either agreed that it was even going to be there. And so I don't know how to really express how important, for some people, and again, it may just be me, but how you approach people and how I'll say it this way. Before getting into this industry, I worked in higher education, and I used to, run a program for kids who would apply to college, but their scores wouldn't allow them to get in. And so they had to come through my program first in order to get full admissions. And one of the things I used to always, share with them was that it's not what you know. We've all heard the saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. And I always share with them, it's not what you know, it's not even who you know, but it's who knows you. And the difference was with those two people, the two people that I'm thinking about, the difference was I began to know them. They made me know who they were, and that was important. So it wasn't just that, they knew who I was. The tables flipped. And so I would encourage people to make sure that you stand out to folks, that you're top of mind when they're thinking about employing. That's the best way to get a job in this space.
Networking, you can never underestimate how important networking and those skills are. Okay, so we always end with a little bit about what to do once you've had the job, just because our audience is specifically marginalized groups of people, and marginalized groups of people very often have to find themselves in positions where they are either, setting boundaries or advocating for themselves in hostile work environments. So the key factors we always want people to keep in mind are know your rights, know what your company's employee handbook, what that says, so knowing how you can advocate for yourself within this company's already existing framework, if that is something that's available to you. Know when to seek legal help. So, know in general in the industry, there are a couple of lawsuits that have been raised on behalf of folks who are working in the industry against employers that have had hostile work environments. You can feel free to research those. Woke itself has our Me Too and Marijuana program, which is a private Facebook group for women in the cannabis industry. We have some legal resources there, but there are other places in your community where you can seek out help, seek out advice, seek out a safe space just to vent and talk to, and also resources. So be aware of those and make sure that if you find yourself in a position where you need to navigate such a hostile work environment, you know what tools you have and resources you have available to you. And now would be the time for our questions. We're actually ending a little bit early, so we've got some time for questions from the audience. Does anybody have anything for us? If you do, please feel free to put it in the chat. I have here a question from Danielle, who wanted to hear about Nee's experience and preferences about resumes and cover letters. I think we covered that. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask? Or alternatively, if you don't want to put it in the chat, you can feel free to chime in here. Okay, it doesn't seem like we have any questions. I quickly checked social media to see if there were any there, and I didn't see any. Eric?
Ashley says she has a question.
Oh, just under the wire. Hey, Ashley, feel free to chime in. Are you still with us, Ashley? If you'd like to put your question in the chat. Oh, can we discuss the workplace safety we should look for when thinking about employment? Oh, that's a good question that I don't think we've actually covered yet during this this session. So workplace safety, what should we be looking for? What questions should we be asking? What can we expect? And what kind of like PPE requirements, OSHA standards should we be aware of?
So the way that I'll answer this, and I used to do a training for OSHA for the construction industry years ago during workforce development and stuff. And one of the interesting things about the cannabis industry is that because depending on which part of the industry you're in, you may be illegal at the federal level or legal at the federal level. Standards like OSHA and other safety measures and so on that are typical to all industries have been slow to become in place in the cannabis industry. And I try to be very, very transparent about that. In a place like California, in a state like California, cannabis industry is still very much regulated by the state's kind of OSHA board there in the state of California. But you can go to some states and I can tell you the conversation about workplace safety and safe work environments are still very much lagging behind. And we still have a long way to go in that regard for this industry. And so I want to say that just to say, you might find yourself, as I said before, in environments that are just really and truly not where they need to be as of yet and are working to get there. There are some bad actors who have no interest in ever getting there, and you do need to be mindful of that. But some companies mean well and want to get there, and it's just, this is a very overly regulated industry, and it can be tough to get there at times. And so it's a balance. And I'm sure that doesn't answer your question, Ashley, but it is one of those things that I think is still very much lagging in our space.
So I think then the question becomes, as Ashley's saying, how do I know as a prospective employee that my safety is important to this prospective employer? How do I advocate for my safety once I'm there?
I think that goes back really to open communications. You at the interview or when you're doing your due diligence practice on looking at employers is to ask those questions. Are any part of my job going to, require heavy lifting? I was, clear about, as a retailer, we're on our feet all the time. We're not lifting, 100-pound boxes, but sometimes delivery mail comes through and it's a heavy box, and I'm aware of the limitations that my team members have, that they might have other health issues, and they bring it up with me, and I'm able to, as an employer, keep that in mind when I'm assigning tasks. I have a team member who has back problems, and I saw them go for a box. I'm like, no, that is not part of your job requirement. You know, and it made me as an employer recognize that I need to train everyone on how to lift. And it's so simple, right? Like there's certain things that are so simple as being able to, you know, as an employer, keep in mind what safety practices, especially in retail, because we're dealing with different clientele, not just from like the aspect of lifting heavy boxes, but also how do I maintain my team members' mental health and well-being, and being aware of that. I know that working with customers every day, face-to-face, during a pandemic is that can be very anxiety ridden. So, you know, we allow our team members to take breaks when necessary. If you've been dealing with 3-4 clients and you need to go in the back and take a breather for the next 20 minutes because you've been doing consults for the last 2 hours, that's okay too. But it's about having those open conversations. And sometimes as employers, I will be completely honest, we are so knee deep in day-to-day operations and trying to grow our business that if I have to myself be aware, but I also appreciate the open communication and the questions from my team members on like, how do we do this safely? Are there safety protocols in place? And if there aren't, how do we move into a space where there are?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that a lot of business owners in the hemp space and even the cannabis space are first-time business owners. And so their learning curve is very steep. And so sometimes they're not aware of the things that they need to have in place. You know, for me, most of the roles in my company are not, they're remote. So again, you're working from home. But, you know, even in that, there are probably some considerations that we as a company need to have in mind. And the way that we do that on the manufacturing side, where there are some risks involved, there is, lifting 50-pound bags of hemp parts. Yeah, they're moving product, that there are definitely some risk involved in that, and so we are required to have insurance and that speaks to that as a part of our agreement with the facility we're in. But then also we try to mitigate some of that in processes as well. So for instance, we create our finished product from a larger 50-pound bag. And so, in our process, we try to be very mindful that that 50-pound bag isn't put on a shelf that has to be then taken down off of that shelf. That 50-pound bag doesn't have to be lifted over someone's head. We have a process in place to where that 50-pound bag is unloaded using a scooper into another, receptor. And so it's breaking it down. So again, that is me as an employer who comes from somewhat of a background of understanding OSHA and workplace safety, having those processes in mind. But I would be lying to you if I would tell you that that's something you can expect across the board. I just know for a fact that it's not.
Thank you guys for that frontline direct from the industry information. And I think that that's kind of to be expected, knowing how new cannabis as an industry is. So I think the key takeaway and the thing that I like to keep in mind is that, as always, I should come prepared. If I am looking at a job in retail, in warehousing, in a place that's governed by OSHA standards, then there are free resources online that will enable me to review what OSHA standards look like and to know what it is I need to know in order to be able to safely advocate and effectively advocate for myself in the workplace. I think that Nee's suggestion of keeping an open line of communication with your employer is really, really important. This shows you two things. One, it shows you that your employer is either open to or not open to receiving input from you and adjusting so that this way the workplace is a safe environment, which then shows you item number 2, whether or not you should be working for this employer. So yeah, in terms of self-advocacy, the most important part is going to be to do your own research and to know your rights, to know your standards and your best safety practices, and keep an open line of communication with your employer. And if your employer is not down for that, then guess finding a new employer.